Hi, welcome back. My name is Tobias Tabasco, and in our last session we finished the Megascans base setup, and we are all ready to dive into the Unreal side of things now. Alright, I think the first thing that we want to do is create a proper landscape with this nice new Megascans textures. I just realized that my landscape is only 60 by 16, so I'm just going to delete that and just quickly recreate the landscape here under Modes Landscape. And then you have to tick the edit layers as well, and I think 63 is a better resolution for what we want to achieve in the end. We're going to use the new Landmass plugin to kind of shape the landscape as well. And if you have not enabled the plugin, it's under plugins and then just Landmass. And if you have enabled it, you should, if you click on the landscape and you're in the edit mode of the landscape, under Sculpt, you should see this blueprint option here, which offers you the new tools to shape the landscape with the Landmass tools. And they are on the blueprint brush here. There's a few custom ones already. And the one that we want to give it like a noisy, wavy pattern is the material only one. Just so you just select it and then click in the scene to add it to the scene. It's going to be adding it here, and also the Landmass Brush Manager is going to be added in addition. As you can see, it doesn't really do anything. It just stays completely flat. I think that's a bug with the current version of that tool. So what you will need to do is add another one, a custom brush that is just the Landmass custom brush, and then I think I can't really remember how I fixed it. Maybe I just compiled that one. So I opened this up, compiled it. Yes, exactly. So so you just open it up and hit compile, and then it pops up. Sorry, it popped up on my second screen. And then, yeah, you can see that the first brush also works with this noise material. And yeah, that brush works by using this noise here, generate noise material, and then you can change the tiling and how high it elevates these things and so on, and it will all apply it basically at runtime. I'm just going to go with maybe this kind of tiling and a bit higher. Maybe we want some higher hills. I think that doesn't look too bad. I think we want a few valleys going on, right? But not too many, I think, if we're going to go with the Iceland set. Maybe we could change that a bit higher here. Well, there's a lot of parameters to play with. I'm just gonna, I think that's fine for now. And then for our, I would say the centerpiece area, I'm just gonna create a shape that is a bit flat and not, well, of course not this triangle here. So to get a more flat version of this, I think you will have to go to single mesh on the brush type, and then for the mesh you will need to select, for example, the cube. And then, well, the cube is, the position doesn't really matter, right? It just affects if it's whether or not it's above or below the landscape to drag it down or up. And then I think what we want to change is the fall off width, for example. It's a massive fall off, which is why it's such a round shape right now. So if we reduce this fall off by a lot, and then we scale the cube up, I think you can just hit R for scaling. R? Is it R? Yes, R. Sorry, I always get confused with shortcuts. And then we kind of scale it a bit. I think the angle is still too much. I think the fall off mode also needs to be changed to width. Yes, there we go. Yeah, not angle, sorry about that. Maybe a bit more. And then also what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this underneath the landscape, because if I deselect it, I don't want to see this cube anymore. And then I'm going to just increase this, the Z offset. So like something a lot higher above the cube, basically, and by doing that I can have the cube underneath the landscape, but the affected area will be on the landscape, right? So yeah, maybe the fall off can be a bit stronger again. We just want something to have a nice presentable area which we can then shape later on with some proper meshes, right? And not just this terrain here. We don't want to use the terrain for our detail area, basically. Yeah, I think that's pretty all right here. I'm pretty happy with that. It's like a small valley hill. And yeah, we can always shape that later on. And then once you're done with these changes, you can just change to the normal select mode again, and all of these will be applied. One great thing about these landmass tools is as well that if you would have any foliage or something painted on these on the landscape, it will automatically adjust with you adjusting these brushes. So that's really, really powerful. You don't have to always change all the foliage once you change the environment. Okay, and then once we have changed, basically created our area here, I think we want to add some materials, of course, to the landscape. So let's just create a proper landscape material. I'm quickly going to shift all of that in our landmass folder here. And all of our meshes are somewhere below in the ground. So maybe let's just drag all of these up to the level of our environment. Just going to put that on my little platform that I created here. There we go. Nice. Save all. Yes. Okay. That's great. Amazing. I love it. Okay. Now it's kind of refreshed itself. These landmass tools are a bit experimental, so just consider that. I mean, they have a few bugs in here and there, but I think they're pretty amazing already, so I just use them. Okay, so of course we're going to need some surface materials first. We cannot use the one from this rock here, so let's go over to Bridge and just import a few of these materials that we downloaded. You can either go on the download button here, it's not visible right now for me, but or you can go here on local to show all the assets that you have downloaded. And yeah, I'm just going to export some of these materials over. I think I really do like this greenish moss here, and I also really like this rocks that are a bit more like have this really rocky surface going on. Maybe that one and this one. Just just play around with these. I mean, you can always change those later on as well. And all right, I think I have a few materials that are that we'll be able to use. You can also just hit the export button and already switch over to Unreal. You will see that it will just import all of these textures then slowly. And then as soon as this is done, nice, we see all of our surface materials here, and all also with the displacement, which we are going to use for the to shape this surface a bit better. Let's create a landscape material. I'm just going to create a new folder in our project and a new material, which is going to be our master material for the landscape. We can also create a material instance already and assign this material instance to our landscape. Of course, it's going to look all black and boring. Sorry, this saving takes a small amount of time because the assets are so large. That's why it's maybe not so good in an actual project to work with 8K textures only, because it just bloats your project if you don't need 8K textures in your project. Okay, now let's go to the material and set that one up correctly. So there's a few ways to blend landscape materials. And the way this works is with blend layers. They're called blend layer. And then you can have this landscape layer blend, for example, to blend between multiple ones. This is the normal way, and then you can just paint on the landscape to blend them. But what I want to do first is to set up a slope blending. So whenever the angle is quite steep here on our hills, I want to change this to a different material. So let's just add a world aligned blend. That is the one that we want for this. I'm gonna shift this over here. We're gonna use this layer blend later on as well. And also what we want to change is we can use these material attributes for this one, because with the layers we always get material attributes out of it, so we can just plug that directly in there, and that's a bit more useful. Okay, and what we actually do want to blend is of course 2 layers, and we need to create these layers first. So I'm gonna come back to that in a second. The way we create these layers, we can just use one of the Megascan preset materials. So in the MS presets under the Megascans, it creates these materials for you. And the one we want is actually the one with the displacement, as we want displacement on the landscape. So we can just go into one of these and select everything except for this end bit, the output. Here you can see it has all of these functions that Quixel created. It's actually quite nice and tidy. And we just want to create these and put them in a material layer. So just copy those with Control copy. And then we need to create a new layer. So I'm going to create a new material layer, ML. And then we can call it whatever we want. I think it's always good to have one grass moss material and one rock material, because these two always look good blended together. So let's create the rock one first. Really simple. And paste all of this stuff from the Quixel material into that one. And then we can delete the input. We don't need the input because we just going to use the one that we have here, and we can put that in, plug that all in there. And we are in theory already good to go. One thing that we want to do before that though is to rename all of the parameters that we're getting here to something that is that is more usable in the material instance, because right now they are all called albedo, metalness and so on. If you would use that multiple times, it would confuse the system, and we cannot add multiple textures. So we need to rename this to something that makes sense. For example, _rock behind all of these. And then we're going to put it into a different group as well, once we are done with adding this name here, so that just in the material instance it's a bit more manageable to actually use that one. And one more thing that we want to do is also add a tiling option per material layer, and we can create a new parameter for this. Just hold S on the keyboard. And then if you hold S and click, you will get automatically a parameter. And then we call it tiling_rock. And we can rebind these to another material node by hitting hold Control and clicking and holding. Then we can rebind all of those. And we just multiply the result out of this tiling node, the global tiling node, basically, with our rock tiling. And we of course want to set this to 1 so that we have a tiling of 1. I know for a fact that the Quixel materials in landscapes need a tiling that is more about 0.33 or something, so that they look good. So I can already put 0.33 in here as a value. If we would want to rotate these as well, which we might want to do, we would need to change this tiling function a tiny bit. I'm going to do this now. You don't necessarily have to if you don't want to rotate your landscape materials. I'm going to go into this function that is is a Quixel function, and we want to create an input there. A scalar input, and we're gonna rebind these two to this scalar input, and we can call that rotation angle, as it's the same name as here, it doesn't matter. And then we want to use the preview as the default value. That's already it. We can save that. And now we have a new input here, which we can use but don't have to use. But of course we want to use it, and we're gonna want to call it rotation angle rock. And that can be 0 for now. And this material is nearly set up correctly. One more thing that I would like to do is make this displacement height value also unique for each material. So you can just copy this multiply here and rename this to displacement. Is it written correctly? Displacement rock, yes. And let's, whatever, keep that at 1 for now, but at least we have a control over it. A unique control, basically. Okay, you can save that. And then we can duplicate it for each layer that we want to have. So let's create one that is moss maybe, and then a rock detail. I think 3 layers are probably enough for now. You can always add more if you wanted more, but yeah, I think that's fine for now. We also have to rename all of this stuff in the layer itself, which is a bit of it's just a monkey work basically. Unfortunately, there's no faster way of doing this, because we need unique textures for each one of these materials. I also just noticed when I finished this renaming that we hadn't put these into a separate group, so you can just select all of the textures at once. You cannot select all of them at once. To do that, you have to select the individual ones, so textures and scalars together. And we can call this textures moss in this case. And all of these we can then put into the same group, textures moss. So just in the material instance, everything is nice and tidy. Let's go back to our rock material, do the same here. Textures rock. And then in our last material, which is our detail rock, we will have to do everything again. Don't forget to put that in a separate group as well again. Detail rock. And then we are good to go to blend our layers together. Here, this is our material. And then we can just select our layers and drag them all into the material, and then we can connect them together. So first of all, we want to blend the moss and the rock together by using this height blend basically. And the way this height blend works is it takes an angle of the slope, right? And this angle could either be controlled by the vertex normal or by another separate normal map. And we want to use the normal map of the rock to kind of give this all a bit more detail. So what we need to do here is get a material attribute, which is the normal of this material layer. And then we want some control over this normal, so we just take a flat normal node. So we can flatten it or make it less flat, depending on what kind of blending we want. A new parameter, holding S again. And I'm just going to call it layer blend. Or maybe slope blend normal flat. And I think a value of 0.75 works quite well for that. We can put that into the into a separate group, and we're just going to call it layer blending. And this normal is in tangent space right now. So we need to convert this to a world space, but we cannot do that because of displacement map. It just doesn't work in displacement materials to use the transform node. So this transform node is not usable in displacement shaders, basically. And because we're blending displacement here, it just doesn't work. So there's a workaround for that. So we need to transform tangent to vertex normal, basically. And we can just put that in here. And this one into the explicit normal. And in this material function here, I will duplicate that because we need to alter this slightly to make this all work with displacement map. It's a bit annoying. If you don't want to use displacement, this is no problem for you at all. But if you want to, then this might be a problem. I'm going to copy that into my material functions folder, which I have here already. And I'm just going to call it MF before that, world aligned blend. That's all good. And it's all a bit chaotic in here. We don't need any of that. But here you can see it's using this transform vector node, which we don't want to use that one. So, oh, sorry, mine is already the altered material that you can see here. The original material looks somewhat like this, which is the explicit normals, which we can't use. So what we need to do is add this blend angle corrected normals here and pipe the explicit normal into the blend angle corrected normals and the vertex normal in the additional normal. And then we hook that up into this dot product here. And that blends the vertex normals together with this new normal map that we added. And then hit apply. And then we want to use that one here instead. So you can just highlight the material function and assign the new one that you just created, and it should be fine. And now we have our blend material here, and we will just need to add a blend node that blends between the two with this explicit normal, as we want the explicit normal as the blend. And, material layer, blend material layer, attributes. There we go, blend material attributes. Sorry about that. And the explicit normal should be fine. And then we want to blend between our two layers. So the moss will be the bottom one, and the rock will be the one in A. And this should already be usable. We can refine this blend a tiny bit here with two parameters. So let's create those two, slow blend, sharpness, and slope blend bias. Good values for these are, I think for the sharpness, something about 30, and let's put that in the right layer blending group as well. And for the bias, actually -20, and then hit apply. And this should already blend the two layers together, but as we haven't assigned any textures right now, it of course looks all uniform. So we will need to open our material instance. Here we go. And then assign the right textures. So for our moss material, metalness we need roughness, normal, displacement, and albedo. I'm just going to choose the moss material that I exported over, this really vibrant one. I like it. Just assign the correct textures. This is the height map. This is normal. Save that. And then for the rock textures, we want to assign the rock textures as well. Metalness we don't need. Displacement, albedo. Just gonna choose a random rock texture. I'm not sure which one is the good looking one, but we can always change that later on. Right now, it doesn't seem to be doing anything, the slope blending. So let's just alter some of these slope blend materials slightly. So it seems the problem was the sharpness. Set this to -20 as well again. And so a value of like 60 or something works a bit better. And there we can see the slope blending in action. I think the rock texture that we're using is maybe not optimal. I think maybe I exported another rock texture. It might be a bit... This one looks quite good. Can change it to that one. Maybe we need to slightly adjust the tiling as well, but where are we? Tiling. Maybe a bit larger. And there is no displacement happening right now. As you can see, there is literally no displacement happening. So you need to kind of adjust the displacement settings slightly. If you go all the way up to displacement number 6 here, then we want to maybe increase the displacement amount so that we see what's going on. Sorry, one detail I completely missed is that we need to enable the displacement, of course, in the material. So if you go back to your landscape material and then just type in tessellation, we need to enable this tessellation here. Save your work before you do that, because sometimes Unreal crashes with the landscape and tessellation. I haven't quite figured out when it actually happens that this that it crashes. It tells us that invert node used in the vertex domain shader input, which is the because we connected the explicit normals, but of course this is exactly the issue I talked about earlier that doesn't work. So we need to use the new vertex normals. As in our material function, you remember we connected this to the second vertex blend here and not to the explicit normals, right? So we use the vertex normal, then this error goes away with the tessellation, and then it should tessellate correctly and apply the displacement as well. Hopefully no crash. I think the crash might happen if we go into the landscape mode again, then it sometimes crashes, but you can kind of circumvent that by toggling the parameters on and off while in that mode, and then it kind of works. It's a bit buggy, but well, it does the job. And now we can adjust our tessellation and displacement here. I'm going to adjust the fade distance to something a lot higher, like 3000, because I don't want the tessellation to fade out directly. If we go into the brush wireframe, we can actually see the tessellation going on here. The landscape tessellates itself automatically already, but I think we want a bit more control over this. So you can see that this parameter, if I change it here, kind of changes the tessellation distance. I'm going to set this to 3000 and this to 1000 because I want 1000 around our camera. I want the tessellation to be always on, and after that it can fade away. And the displacement amount is really low right now. I think we need to probably up this. Oh wow, by a lot. And it kind of creates artifacts that I don't really like here. So in order to fix this, we need to blend the displacement and the rest of the material attributes differently. So I fixed this by adding another world aligned blend, but the one from the engine, so not ours, but the one from the engine, which still has the default vertex normal code in here, just the vertex normal. And sorry about that. And then I'm basically just connecting all of this again and use that to blend just the get material attribute world displacement of each one, so the moss and the rock. And then I'm just lerping between these two displacement material attributes, and I'm setting this material attribute here again, just the displacement attribute, and the rest of the attributes, it will take the ones that we have blended here with this function. And that should work pretty fine now. So if we take a look at our blend, we can see that now the grass looks as it should, because the grass is blending smoothly with the displacement, just using the vertex normal, and the rest of the material attributes are using the normal blend with the explicit normals here, so we can get this really nice sharp edges to blend between the two. And well, if you overdo it, you will still see these weird fractures going on, but I think you get the idea. Maybe I want to reduce this bias here. Just in case I want to reduce this bias separately so that we can kind of get rid of these artifacts here. I'm going to add a separate parameter. That one I'm just going to go a bit lower in the blend, so that is a bit more localized. There we go. Okay, I think that looks quite nice. We have the displacement for the rocks and the grass. And let's get our third layer in now, which would be our detailed rock. And I think the detailed rock we can just blend over the moss. So if we jump to our detail rock, we can blend that one now with a normal layer blend. So just hit a layer blend all the way at the top, landscape layer blend. And then we add 2 entries there. The first one would be the moss. Well, actually the second one would be the moss, and the first one would be the rock detail. And then, oh sorry, we rewire these nodes again. Control left drag will rewire all nodes. So I want to blend between the rock detail and the moss, and then of course the slope blend will kick in after. And in the layer blend itself, you have a few options. I just renamed these to the proper names. And then instead of weight blend, you want it to be a height blend. You don't have to change any of the other values. But for the height blend, we need to get our height values first. So we can copy the get material attributes here. Let me go full screen on that. And we have our displacement material attribute. The height blend, it wants a float 3, so we need a float 1, just a float. The displacement right now here I think is a float 3. So what we want to do is create a mask that only takes 1 channel, which would then make this a float value. So if we pipe this in, we don't get any errors. If we would pipe this in, it just wouldn't compile the material. And to get this mask, by the way, you would just hit Shift and C, and Shift C gives you this parameter here. That's a component mask parameter. This also is that one if you would want to search for it. So we add this in here. Okay, and this is our base layer, and this is our slope blend. Hit C to get a comment. Don't forget to save regularly. Of course, everything will look completely whack right now because we haven't assigned any textures and so on. So let's assign some textures first, and then fix the remaining issues. I'm just going to use an arbitrary second rock texture. And then to blend between these two textures, we have to go into the landscape mode and actually blend these two together. Careful, the Unreal might crash when you do this, so just be very aware to save everything before you do this now. So yeah, my Unreal crashed right away. So just hitting restart and going back into the landscape mode kind of worked again. So it's a bit unreliable. But now I'm finally, so I just went to a landscape and I'm here in this painting mode. In there we should then also see our 2 layers here, our rock detail and our moss layer, and we can paint between the two. What you need to do though is assign one of these layer attributes here. And we want to assign a weight blended layer, of course, because we want to paint it. We can also just do it by height alone, but we want to paint it, I think. And then I'm just gonna put that into our landscape. And the same for the moss. We have our two landscape layers here. As you can see, the rock, detail rock now covers the entire surface, which is maybe not what we want. Maybe we want to have the moss on the entire surface. So all you need to do that is just right click on the moss, fill layer, and it should fill all of our environment, all of the landscape with our moss material. Here we go. If we wanted now to get back some of that rock detail, if we just click in it, you might see some weirdness going on as it applies this depending on the height of our materials. I think we can fix that by going into the material again. And then we will need to kind of adjust these masks here slightly, the height masks of these textures. And we can just do that by multiplying this here to get a bit more a bit more control over how we are blending these two together. So I'm just going to call that layer blend goes with moss strength. And layer blend moss contrast with a power node. Power is always a good way of increasing the contrast of your texture or of your black and white value. And I'm just going to duplicate that. Okay, now that I've nicely arranged those, I'm going to put that in the right group as well. Layer blending, apply. And now we have a bit more control of how we exactly want to blend these together. Maybe the default values should be set to 1 on both of these, all of these actually. And if we go into the material instance now and we play around with these strength and contrast parameters, we can get a nicer result, I think. It's going to take a while to compile now because our material has become bigger and bigger, and it will just need to calculate all of these changes. Okay, and now with these new parameters that I've added, the blend looks a bit better. If I just changed the moss strength, for example, to -1, and the contrast of the rock detail to 0.01, and the strength to 10. Like I think it's just playing around with these values and finding something that works for you, to kind of increase how the blend actually works, you know, like the way it behaves. I'm still getting some weird artifacts sometimes with the tessellation here, but I think most of the time this looks quite fine. And yeah, now we can blend a bit more of our detail rock in here and there. And it kind of doesn't affect our second rock layer, of course, because that one is blended based on the slope. And I think that looks really nice. Like blending multiple rocks together is a really nice way of creating detail. And we could, I mean, I just took an arbitrary rock, but we can maybe take one that fits a bit better to this other rock rather than the one that I'm having here right now. Maybe that one will fit a tiny bit better. It's just playing around with these Quixel assets and finding the ones that are right for your project. Yeah. These ones here actually look quite nice. Really nice and chunky. Maybe a bit too much displacement going on. If we are changing this displacement values, you will also see that there's some changes in the blending, of course, because kind of linked the displacement to the blending. So just be aware of that. Nice, okay. So now we have created a 3-layer blend material. You can also, by the way, adjust these Quixel textures slightly if you open them up. You have all these adjustment sliders here to, if you would, for example, want to adjust this rock to the other rock, I could maybe alter the brightness slightly. Always takes a bit of time to calculate. Or if you want to change the hue or the saturation a bit. Just to make these textures look a bit more uniform and more woven together, basically. Okay, so I think that already covers the main bit of our landscape material. We know how to blend these textures together nicely, and we get some nice, nice looking environment here. I'm just gonna adjust some of the settings slightly just to get bit more detail here and there, but I'm already pretty happy with the result that I have here. One thing to notice is that the reflections, let me quickly save everything, get out of this landscape mode. So one thing that we notice here are the reflections in these reflection capture spheres. They're kind of not really showing us what we want to see. Sorry, not reflection capture spheres, these are actually here, just these objects here. So what we actually do want to add is a sphere, reflection capture sphere here. And as soon as you drag this in, you can see that the environment in these reflections updates more or less correctly. This is of course because we're not in the RayTraced mode, right? We are in the ScreenSpace reflections. And unfortunately in these capture spheres, you don't really see this, the environment, it stays black, but at least it's better than nothing. And you can also move these around. You can see that the reflection moves around with it. But I think it's fine on kind of on eye level height. And also we can build the reflections capture. You can just go here on this little arrow, build reflection captures, and then it kind of updates again as well. If you would have multiple, for example, and you then start building the reflection captures, it kind of blends them between multiple angles correctly. So usually what you want is one large one and one that is a bit smaller for the smaller details around each object. So for example, one here in this little corner that kind of captures all the details in this area. And then you can just, again, build the reflection captures and it will kind of blend between these together. Yeah. So now here we can see this is a bit more accurate and our large detail is still there from this large reflection capture over here that is capturing the entire landscape. Okay, and just to compare this to the RayTraced reflections, the RayTraced reflections of course look way more accurate. You can see all the detail going on. And here it's quite obvious now that we are having a proper scene. One artifact that you might notice is all of this weird black stuff going on as soon as we turn on the ray tracing. That is, I noticed this, and that is due to the translucency ray tracing. I have no idea why this is happening. It makes no sense. But as I had the translucency enabled, if you disable the translucent ray tracing, these artifacts will go away. So it seems like you cannot have translucent ray tracing with all of this environment stuff going on here, just so you know. I think it has to do with the displacement actually. So displacement with the ray traced translucency doesn't go hand in hand, even though they're not linked at all together. But yeah, this is with the ray traced reflections. Of course, it looks awesome. And this is without. I think it's good either way. Okay, this concludes our landscape setup. In the next video, we're gonna take a look at how we can blend Megascans assets with the landscape material via virtual textures. Thank you for watching as always, and see you in the next one.